welcome to the Tales of Osteopathy students with me, Chelsea, and my good friend V. How are you doing, V?
I'm good. We're so excited to be here again for our 4th episode.
Episode 4! Oh, how exciting. Thank you so much to everyone that's listened so far. We're super pumped.
Yeah, we've had such lovely messages as well and really supportive words from people on social media, so we're really appreciative.
Yeah, we're so happy that you like it. We love it. We love it.
Yeah.
So V, what have you been up to? What's going on?
Just suffering with the heat and sleep and stuff like that, as everybody in the UK and elsewhere I'm sure is struggling with at the moment. And I'm currently sat on a sofa bed with a dog's cool mat underneath me. We bought a cooling mat for my dog to sleep on and she only occasionally sits on it. So I've now taken it into my bed and I'm just sat on a small dog's mat at the moment.
I love that.
It's great though.
Does it work?
Oh yeah.
Does it keep you cool?
Yeah, and keep your sheets in like a plastic bag and then put them in the freezer during the day. Put them on your bed at night. Works very well.
That is genius.
It's really good.
I might do that today, actually.
Yeah. How are you doing, Jessie?
Oh, I'm over the heat. I know I'm like the most British person that has ever existed, but it's too hot. But also, to be fair, my flat's staying quite cool, so I just haven't really left the house.
Yeah.
To be honest, just stayed inside.
Ideal.
Staying nice and cool. But yeah, apart from that, I think it's been a pretty chill week this week.
Yeah. Have you got any nice snacks or drinks this episode?
Oh, I do.
Woohoo.
I have the traditional Chelsea masala chai. I'm just going to call it Chelsea chai. It's Chelsea chai.
Yeah, Chelsea chai is nice.
Chelsea chai, and I've gone vegan classic. I've got the Oreos.
Oh yeah, so good. Double stuffed, of course.
Oh no, they weren't on offer. These ones were only like 60p. So
fair. Always the double stuffed.
Oh, the double stuff is something else. Once you have a double stuff, you go to another one. It's like there's not enough in here.
Yeah, you want to head down to like Lidl or Aldi. They do a knockoff brand, but double stuffed. They taste exactly the same, and they're like 40p or something like that. They're very good.
I will head down. Lidl is a 50-minute walk from my house.
Ooh, 50 minutes.
Yeah, I don't drive. So,
oh yeah, you don't drive.
Yeah, so for me, I'm just walking around in my little backpack, like going to the supermarkets, finding all the stuff. This is why I still get ID'd, because I look like a child with my backpack, like wandering around getting my food.
Yeah.
So I always have to think about, I'm very limited in terms of the amount of stuff that I can buy, because I live up a big old hill as well. So I have to carry it up the hill.
Unlucky dude. But the aircon in my car is broken, so I don't feel too bad for you, because it's like being breathed on. Yeah, but it's honestly like being breathed on by somebody. That's what my aircon feels like. It's gross.
I love it. It's a big week for a fair few people this week, isn't it? It's results day today for the A-level students, and GCSEs are next week, aren't they?
Yeah, we're really, really feeling for all of the students getting results back this week, because we know that you've worked so hard and you're the first school-age education group to have ever faced the current circumstances.
Yeah.
We're wishing you all well and good luck, and even if you don't get the grades that you wanted, please remember that grades aren't everything. I know that seems so annoying for somebody to say now, because I've been out of school for a long time, but I got a D at biology and didn't do any science at A-level, and I managed to get into a nursing degree and now an osteopathy degree without any of it, just off interviews alone. So please know that just because you don't get the grades you wanted doesn't mean that those doors are closed for you.
Your whole entire world at this moment in time is just studying and this course and these grades that you're getting. But if it's not what you want, don't worry. There's always a chance to do something else, or even do that. I mean, the world is in complete chaos at the moment, and it's just not the norm. So it is a struggle. But for example, I'm now doing an osteopathy degree, and I did double science for GCSE, and then I went on to college and didn't stay at sixth form and did fine art because I wanted to paint and be creative. Then I went on to university my first round and did music business. I hadn't done any science since GCSE, and I'm now in an osteopathy degree because I did a quick access course, which was a 4-day intensive crazy fest, to say
Yeah.
the least. But
Yeah.
you'll get there, so don't worry about it. Don't let it put barriers up for you, because you'll be able to do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, and we both have conditions that affect our learning as well,
Yeah.
and we still manage to do okay, don't we, Chels?
Yeah, we do. Hey, I got an A plus in my anatomy and physiology exam this year.
Yeah, you did.
I'm very chuffed with that. Very chuffed.
Nailed it.
It turns out revising pays off.
Weird that. Shall we start with the A and P corner?
A and P. Today we're going to talk about the magical, mystery, wonderful land of homeostasis.
Ooh, homeostasis.
Homeostasis. I love homeostasis because I think it's one of those things that you say the term and people are like, what are you talking about, unless you know about it. But I think it's super simple really to understand, and your body's doing it all the time. What is homeostasis? So homeostasis is the maintaining of a constant internal environment. By internal environment, we mean your body. So your body inside is constantly maintaining this internal environment from the external environment. So the world is constantly changing, and we're doing different things, we're putting different foods and stuff like that in our bodies. And so our body is constantly trying to maintain this really happy, healthy, lovely environment to make sure you stay fit, healthy and strong, and your body does all the things that you need to do. A couple of examples is your body temperature, for example. At the moment, we are all too hot, especially us Brits. We're like, I can't stand the heat anymore. And so in order for our body to stay at that 37 degrees, that temperature that our body needs to kind of make sure it's nice and healthy and doing everything it needs to do, there are things we need to do. From the external temperature that's coming in, that's heating our body up, our internal body needs to cool it down a little bit just to make sure we stay at 37 degrees internally. So that is one thing to do with homeostasis. It's also your blood pressure, your water levels, your blood glucose levels, so your sugar levels within your blood. These are all constantly maintained by your body, and things are constantly changing and doing different stuff to make sure it's all in that little sort of margin where it needs to be. So it can just fluctuate a little bit, but not in the danger zones. Not in the danger zones at either side. So there are 6 factors to homeostasis. You ready, V?
Tell me these. I've sort of forgotten about this, so it's kind of nice that you're teaching me as well today.
For me, I love all these weird little things that all the body does without consciousness all the time. All these things that are changing.
So clever.
I'm like, how are we alive? Magic. So the first of the 6 different factors that happen with homeostasis is a stimulus. So first of all, we need something to stimulate a change. So if we take that body temperature example, and the current environment we're all in to this day is it's hot, right? So we've got this heat.
Yeah.
So we're heating the body up. So the body starts to feel hot. The next stage is receptors. So there's going to be receptors within the body that recognize that the body's heating up. Okay, so little different receptors that live all around the body. It's like, gets an alert saying there's fire. It's hot. I need to do something about this. So what those little receptors do is they send an afferent with an A, an afferent message towards the control center, which in this case is the brain, the hypothalamus in the brain, which controls your body temperature. So the control center, I always imagine this is like there's a little guy sat in the middle of the spaceship, just like getting an alert. There's a red alert flashing on his dashboard. The body's getting hot. And it's like, oh, we need to do something about this. So they send an efferent message, so with an E, to an effector. So that is something else within the body that is going to make an effect to help cool the body down. So there's a couple of different things that happen to help cool the body down. So use this as an example. First of all, we have something called vasodilation. Vasodilation is where your veins and your arteries widen. They dilate. Think about your pupils, dilated pupils, they get bigger. And what that does is it means that the blood can come closer to the surface of the skin, so some of the heat from the body can leave. So that's why you get all red and flushed and things like that when you get too hot, because you're vasodilating. Then if that doesn't work and your body's still too hot, then you start to sweat. The way that sweating works is you get that water, that moisture that sits on the surface of the skin, and where that water starts to evaporate is where heat also starts to leave whilst that evaporates. That again helps cool you down. Lovely. So then the body's nice and cool, stays nice and cool, everything's functioning, lovely and happy. Yes? It also happens the other way around. So say, for example, we've done all this stuff, we're starting to get too cold. Now the rains come. The rains finally turn up, this storm that we've been expecting for the last few days, and suddenly the temperature drops. And we're like, ooh, feeling a little bit chilly. So that chilly is then that stimulus again. So we're back around to the top of the cycle. So number one, we get that stimulus of we're feeling a little bit cold. So that message is then picked up by different receptors compared to the ones that are finding heat. And then they send that to the control center. The little guy at the helm of the ship within your brain gets another flashing light on his dashboard saying, oh, we're getting a little bit cold now. From that control center, they send an efferent message to another effector. The first thing that's going to happen in order to keep that heat within the body is going to be vasoconstriction, so the opposite to vasodilation. The veins and the arteries get smaller to keep that heat within the body rather than it leaving. If you're still not getting warm enough, it's going to send a message to your muscles where it's going to start to ask them to contract and release, which is your shivering. So you start to shiver because your muscles are responsible for generating a lot of heat within your body as well. Then they start to contract and release and you stay nice and warm. And then because you're not getting cold anymore, your body's feeling nice and happy and lovely, then that removes the stimulus. So that is 2 examples of these different methods of homeostasis. And those 2 particular things can also be referred to as a negative feedback system.
I remember the negative feedback and the positive feedback loops now. That was really nicely explained, by the way. I almost forgot we were recording the podcast. And I was like, wow, I'm learning so much.
Negative feedback is essentially the opposite of the stimulus. So like we've said about these examples with the body being too hot or too cold, it's creating something that is the opposite to the stimulus. So if the body's too hot, we're trying to make the body cooler. If the body's too cold, we're trying to make the body hotter. So that is the example of a negative feedback system. We also have positive feedback, which is where the stimulus is amplified by the effect. Okay, so an example of this is breastfeeding. Okay, so you've got your new lovely little life, your new lovely little baby, and you're going to breastfeed the child. So that breastfeeding with the baby suckling on the nipple is the stimulus. That's the first stage of the stimulus. That is then picked up by receptors in the nipple, which is then sent an afferent message back to that control center, so back to the brain. The brain then releases 2 hormones. So this is prolactin and oxytocin. Prolactin being what it says on the tin, prolactin, pro-lactation. So it's encouraging the lactation of the milk. And oxytocin helps release the muscles to allow that milk to come out so the baby can feed. Oxytocin is also full of love and joy and squidginess, which is why it helps connect you to your child and feel those emotions and have that lovely connection with your new lovely little life. So with that, that's the efferent message. So those hormones are the efferent message which is going to those effectors, and therefore the effector is that the milk comes out, the baby can feed. And with that, because it is a positive feedback system, the more the baby suckles on the nipple, the more milk is going to be produced. So it's a positive effect. So it's just adding to the stimulus. The only thing that will stop that cycle from continuing is by the stimulus being removed. So the baby stopping to drink milk, which is why mothers can breastfeed as long as they want to. As long as the baby keeps feeding, then they will be able to continue to produce breast milk.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting.
It's cool. So yes, negative and positive feedback systems. So it's kind of important also to understand that for all of this stuff to work, we've got to make sure our nervous system and also our endocrine system is functioning effectively. Both the nervous system and the endocrine systems are both messenger systems. The nervous system is very direct, it's very fast, it's sending a message directly to somewhere. It's like, we've got to do this immediately, no messing about, and is very short, it doesn't last very long. An endocrine response is a little bit slower, it takes its time, but it's much more wider spread and affected. So it will go through the whole body because these chemicals, these hormones, the endocrine are put through the whole body. They go into the bloodstream, but they're only picked up by cells that have got the specific receptor for that particular hormone. They last in the body a lot longer. It takes a little bit longer, a bit more time, but they stay in the body for a longer period of time as well. So it's really important to understand for homeostasis to be effective and our bodies to making sure it's doing everything it needs to do to keep us alive is the nervous system and the endocrine system need to be working efficiently.
That was so nicely explained, Chelsea. Are there any other examples of like different types of systems and how they maintain homeostasis?
Yes. There are. So we could talk about, say, the blood glucose levels, so blood sugar levels within the body, which is super exciting. And I also think the names of the hormones involved in that are quite cool.
Oh yeah, tell me. Because this is like very relevant for like diabetic patients and stuff like that. So it's good for us to know that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. So for an example, if we take, it's just your average day. You're sat down, having a nice time, you're feeling snacky, a little bit snacky. So what you do is you, like I might do in a second, is reach for an Oreo, since we've got them there. So Oreos, they're pretty sugary, huh? Got a fair bit of sugar. So that's your stimulus. So you're eating the Oreo, swallow it down, and your receptors within the body picks up the fact that, oh, hey, we've got some sugar in the body. We've got some sugar and we need to do something about that. So it sends the efferent message to the pancreas to release insulin.
Nice, okay.
So with that, the insulin is then sent out, which takes the glucose molecules and everything, all the sugar that's in the body, and it puts it into cells. So that's what insulin does, is it chucks sugar into cells. And if there's an excess of that sugar, it will probably go into the liver. So we want to make sure the blood sugar stays at a nice happy level all of the time. So where diabetes is concerned, for example, the body's not producing insulin. So the cells aren't getting that sugar that it needs to be able to do all the things that cells need to do to keep your body alive. So this is why diabetics will inject insulin in order to be able for their body to absorb that sugar. In the event that your blood sugar drops, okay, so your blood sugar has gone down, you're feeling weak, you're feeling tired, feeling lethargic, and you need some more sugar within the body, then sometimes that sugar that's stored within the liver will then be released into the body. And that's done via glucagon.
Woo, glucagon. It sounds like a little like water pistol like advert or anything like that.
Yeah, glucagon.
Yeah.
For all your glucose needs. Then that will be released into the body as well. So it's constantly saying the reason we have this ability to store things like sugar and things like fat and stuff within our body is in the event that our fat, we need some form of energy within our body so we can release it again. So this is one of the things that back in the day was very, very useful when we didn't have a lot of food. But now we have a constant abundance of food. And now that means that we've got excess sugar, we've got excess fat, all these sorts of things. But the reason our body have that capability to store it is so that we can access it when we need it, if we can't get access to sugar and things like that.
So good, so good. The body's so clever.
It's so clever. Blood pressure's super cool too. Quite like blood pressure. Again, it's like with vasoconstriction and dilation. Did you know, V, that having a nice warm bath lowers your blood pressure?
I actually did know, because I did like a whole deep dive into hydrotherapy and all of that sort of stuff, because really I just wanted an excuse to say to my family and all of that sort of stuff, like, this is why I need a whole hour in the bath, plus like bath bombs and everything like that, because it's good for you.
Yes, it absolutely is. Because going back to the vasoconstriction and dilation, so if you're in a nice warm bath, what happens to your body? You get nice and warm. Getting hot. And so what happens with that is vasodilation, right? The veins and the arteries, they get wider, so it's easier for blood to pass through. And we'll see this with anything, right? So if you say you've got a hose pipe and you squeeze it, what happens to the pressure of that water? It goes up, right? There's so much more pressure if you squeeze it. So when you release it, that pleasure.
It is pleasurable.
That pressure can flow through, it reduces because the liquid, the fluid in there can flow through much more easily. So when we take that into account, if you've got high blood pressure, you're kind of sat in a bath and you've opened up all those arteries, your blood is going to flow through much easier and lowers the pressure of your blood. So vasoconstriction and dilation is works in so many different ways, so it does also affect your blood pressure. But your body is always trying to keep your blood pressure at a certain level. So if you've got high blood pressure, that can be a sign that your arteries have got blockages. Because if the artery itself is smaller, that means the pressure is going to be higher, right? So we need to clear out all those blockages and things like that within the body in order to make sure your blood pressure can reduce. Because consistent chronic high blood pressure, it's bad.
It is bad.
Bad. We don't want that. No, sir.
Dude, this is really cool. Love it.
Cool, isn't it?
I feel like we're back at uni.
Welcome to my lecture.
Where's your monocle at now?
If only. I might get one, just for funsies.
Yeah, don't get one. I'll get one for you. And you can have like a little chain and everything in your front pocket.
Yeah. How do you keep it on though? Like, surely you must get a headache from like squinting.
Do they just have like really flabby eye sockets that like the skin flaps over? The monocle keeps it in place.
I'm just going to quote you here. Flabby eye sockets that the skin just flaps over. That's absolutely it.
Oh no. Funny. We understand homeostasis now as how systems flow together and affect each other, about how for a very, very long time, how they used to think that you were affected by types of fluids in your body. For our historical medical case today.
Oh, yes.
So I want to tell you about how up until the 19th century, how homeostasis was seen in the history in the form of the 4 humours.
4 humours, ha 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 ha.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, we're not talking about like Ashlingby, that sort of thing. We're not talking about comedies. Oh, she's so funny. We're going to take it back to classical Greece, around 460 to 370 BC, when Hippocrates was alive, the father of medicine. And he wasn't into all these superstitions around diseases, that they were caused by gods. He was like, no. Zeus didn't smite you down with a lightning bolt as a punishment, and now you've got this disease. Diseases are natural. In fact, he believed that existence itself was represented by the 4 basic elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Sounds very familiar when we're thinking about Ayurvedic medicine as well. And within humans, all of these elements were related to the 4 humours, which are blood, phlegm, which is a gross word, black bile, and yellow bile. So if you try to imagine the humoral body, so the body is like a container, and within are the 4 humours or fluids. And for health to be achieved, those fluids need to be in equal levels, or illness, sickness, or mood disruptions could occur when one or more is out of balance with each other. So each humour was centred in a particular organ, so the brain, the lung, the spleen, and gallbladder, and related to particular personality types. So if you had too much blood, you'd be called sanguine, so you might be overly hot or lustful. Too much black bile and you'd be melancholic. So melancholy, as we know, is somebody who might be depressed, where there might be something to do with brain chemistry or situations that require therapy. And that would be what you would be like if you had an excess of black bile. And too much yellow bile, you'd be choleric. So you'd be bad-tempered, irritable, violent, like the sort of people who might get into like a bar fight or something like that. Somebody wore the same toga as them or whatever. And too much phlegm, you'd be phlegmatic. So in the context of the time, that person would be apathetic. So disinterested, lazy, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So why the humours became unbalanced, they used to think, was if you ate the wrong food, so too hot or too cold for the type of humours that you had, or if you sort of let unchecked character flaws go unmodified, or you could be predisposed to being imbalanced in a particular humour due to the weather of the time of year, like when it's so hot outside, we can all be a little bit irritable, or age, or sex, or gender. And they even thought the very air around you could have effect on the humours. So similar to how we have germ theory, they had something called miasma theory. So miasma theory literally means bad air, which you can breathe it or you can absorb it. And so this is why they were not into bathing. And I didn't realise this. So they actually thought that bathing was dangerous because it used to open your pores and you'd be susceptible to letting miasma in. And that's why they didn't bathe as much. So they'd change their clothes a lot or wear perfume oil. And this is also why, if you look at plague doctors, they used to wear these masks that sort of looked like bird beaks. And those beaks were actually filled with flowers and like dried herbs and stuff like that to prevent the miasma from the plague victims getting into the plague doctors.
It's what Posies are, isn't it? So, ring a ring of roses, a pocket full of posies. That's what that was.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. There's often like really creepy and like dark settings to nursery rhymes, isn't there?
Oh yeah, like that whole nursery rhyme was like ring a ring of roses, a pocket full of posies. What's the next bit?
Is it a tissue,
Yeah.
we
I
all
didn't know
fall
if there was
down?
a bit of a tissue, we all fall down. It's because if you had the plague, when you started sneezing, that meant you were about to die.
Oh, lovely. That's kind of how people look at you now. If you sneeze in public, everyone's just like, no, they don't. There's no like, bless you, or like, just move slightly away. They literally look at you with pure fear. Corona!
Yeah.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be outside. Get back to your home. No sneezing here.
So in the 1st century, Galen of Pergamum, who was a gladiator surgeon, which sounds fucking cool, in Rome declared blood as the most dominant humour. So the practice of venesection, which literally means vein, like cutting, gained even more importance. So Galen developed the 4 humour theory further, and he wrote a lot as well about his account on being a surgeon, and all of his anatomy, though, his internal anatomy, was based on animals that he dissected, because human dissection was illegal in Imperial Rome. And this is important later. So humoral science was then seen later in the 9th century, the golden age of Arabic scientists and theorists such as Rhazes and Avicenna, who was really cool. Avicenna wrote some really important books that were used like even up until the 17th century. I think one of them's called like the Canon of Healing or something like that.
Yeah.
And they were really important because they translated all of these ancient works by the Greek and Romans into Arabic, which then later passed on into Western Europe for us to use. So after the fall of the Roman Empire, the Christian church. You can tell I haven't been to church for a while.
We love combining words. We should create the dictionary of Chelsea and V, and I'll combine
We
that.
actually could. So the Christian church filled the power void. And the church set up lots of medical schools attached to monasteries, but only using Galen's work to teach. Because Galen believed that the human body was so well designed that a creator, a god, must have created it. And therefore, human dissection was forbidden. So all of these restrictions and Galen's errors, so he thought the kidneys were in the wrong position because he'd only practiced on monkeys, which have different kidney formation to us, was passed on to all of these medicine students, and then for hundreds of years human dissection was forbidden, and people actually went to prison for defying the church's laws and stuff like that. Really hindered medical progression. From the 11th century to the 19th century, humoral science was the mode of understanding shared by all. Every single person was like, this is the word of all of these people back in throughout the history, and the word of the church. So physicians only use that information.
Interesting.
Really interesting, isn't it? I love knowing the history of the restrictions and progress of medicine and how that can be seen now. So how they used to rebalance the 4 humours could be done by removing the excess humour, which through various means meant using bloodletting, giving laxatives or purgatives and stuff like that. And there's a very interesting episode of This Podcast Will Kill You about how poison was used as medicine and the difference between what's a medicine and what's a poison.
The dosage, essentially.
Yeah, the dosage and the intent, essentially. Yeah. So there's various ways to bloodlet using specific spots on the body to rid particular types of illnesses, and adjustments for the frequency and quantity of blood to be let using various methods and tools. So generalised methods were done by venesection using fleams, which essentially look like a set of house keys but with blades on the end. And a spring-loaded, and a spring-loaded lancet, which looked like one of those like silver old lighters with a blade on the end. So really fun things to keep lying about at the bottom of your handbag or something like that.
Of course.
Yeah, as you do. And then localised methods were done by scarification, which looks like a little box, like a weed grinder or something like that, but with 8 tiny blades. And it almost like a cat scratch sort of thing. And this was followed by cupping. As we know, that's become a lot more popular. And I'm sure we'll cover that in a future episode, which sort of involves placing a dome-shaped glass over the skin and extracting the air by suction or prior heating. And of course, our little friends, the leeches, got used for bloodletting, usually involved the medicinal leech, which is called Hirudo medicinales. So you're thinking about bloodletting, you're like, yeah, that's a really ancient practice, but really we have bloodletting today. It's just called phlebotomy.
Yeah.
And it's practiced in essentially everywhere. You might have had it done if you've done blood donating, or it's even used to treat conditions such as hepatitis B, C, hemochromatosis, and polycythemia. Certain studies have linked excess iron to certain diseases. So most of your body's iron is in your red blood cells, in hemoglobin, which is an important protein for shuttling oxygen through the body. And iron can accept and donate electrons easily, which is great for shuttling oxygen, but it can also lead to the formation of free radicals. And these are really like unstable molecules which have unpaired electrons. So they can react readily with DNA, RNA, and proteins, which can lead to various diseases.
You want to get that shit out.
Yeah, exactly, which is where phlebotomy comes into. So hemochromatosis, crikey, that's a long word, is a genetic disorder of iron metabolism, which leads to abnormal iron accumulation in things like the liver, the pancreas, the heart, that sort of stuff. And it's treated periodically with phlebotomy to maintain the ferritin levels. And ferritin is like the universal intracellular protein that stores iron and releases it in a controlled fashion. It can minimize further iron deposition. They use phlebotomy. So I thought that was really cool. And obviously they use leeches with post-operative care of skin grafts and re-implanting fingers and ears and toes and that sort of stuff. Love watching videos about that.
Of course you do.
And the leeches remove the blood pooled under the skin graft, which helps to restore circulation in blood vessels. And the leech saliva actually contains molecules that stop blood thickening and platelets from collecting at the wound site. So it's really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm really into finding out the theory of all that sort of stuff with leeches and, you know, why they're good. But it's so interesting because that sounds so much like Ayurveda. There's so many similarities. Sometimes I think, especially because Ayurveda is older than this stuff. So to me, it's like there's a bunch of white guys that have been like, oh, I found this interesting theory and I'm just going to rework it myself and call myself the father of medicine. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hippocrates didn't like come up with the 4 humours. He took inspiration and he was one of the privileged few who could probably write at the time and was in that position where people would read what he wrote as well, or what he wrote would be translated to the masses, which is why it became more popular and why he's one of the faces of and is called the father of medicine as well. It'd be interesting to see on an Ayurvedic point of view about their perspective on disease and how to treat it.
I think it's really interesting. It's all about balance, essentially. Everything to do with Ayurveda. The most important thing with Ayurveda is preventative care and how you can take care of yourself. And that first stage is not even with a physician, it's with yourself. It's understanding you, it's understanding your body, what it does, how it works, how you feel, and being in touch with yourself is the first thing that's really important. If we talk, I guess, a little bit about the development of disease in terms of Ayurveda and how they see it, there's essentially 6 different stages. What about the 6 stages today? We had 6
Yeah,
factors
you
of
were, weren't you?
6 factors, 6 stages with this. So in Ayurveda, it's referred to as Kriya Kal. Kriya can be translated to action, and Kal is time. So it's talking about kind of action within time. So we've got these different stages of how disease can develop in the body. Any person with common sense will say chronic disease doesn't happen overnight, right? It's not you wake up one morning, I'm chronically ill, you know, it's something that develops over time. Symptoms start to get slowly worse, things like that. And then eventually you go to the doctor and it's like, oh, okay, now this is what you've got. We can give you a diagnosis. So there's something that happens earlier, within the body that we should be aware of in terms of our own body, so we can stop chronic disease developing within the body. And that's all about us being in touch with ourselves. And the benefit of knowing this and kind of knowing more about your body is that you can catch an early diagnosis and you can stop this stuff from happening. And it's just about taking care of yourself. It's the most important thing.
It seems weird, that notion, doesn't it? Taking care of yourself can prevent disease happening. It's a shock,
yeah, absolutely.
isn't it?
In the Western world that we live in today, it's all about work. That's what we do. And we get so focused up, and it's like we get up in the morning, drag ourselves out of bed, have a shower, go to work. Probably maybe, travel for an hour or more to get there, spend 8 hours or more in the office. We travel an hour or more back home. Then it's like, okay, let's shove some food in our face because I'm hungry and I've been at work all day, sit in front of the TV and watch that for a couple of hours and then go to bed. And you don't tune into yourself at any point in the day. You're on autopilot and you're just not thinking about these things in more detail. Obviously, having space to be able to do this is almost a luxury in some cases, especially if you've got kids and things as well, which is why within Ayurveda they say sort of like the morning routine and all this stuff that you do, you should get your kids involved, because one, you're going to teach them really good habits that they're going to take care of themselves as they grow up, and two, it's not like you have to get your kids ready, you're all getting ready and doing this stuff together, which is kind of, I really like that whole more kind of family community vibe sort of thing. But in terms of their view of disease and how disease develops within the body, is the first stage you've got is something called sankayam, which means accumulation. So we have natural accumulation within the body. This is based on various different factors, and we don't really sort of necessarily notice when this is happening. And it can be from the seasons. For example, it's hot, you got more heat in the body, you're accumulating more heat. Or it can be just down to your food. So the first thing is to notice how you feel after you eat. That's a really important thing. So just being in tune with yourself. These sort of accumulations can develop from different seasons, from what we refer to as mistakes of intelligence. So not waking up early in the morning and stuff. It's like you stay up till 2 a.m. watching Netflix. Yeah, that's a mistake of intelligence. You're not in tune with nature and your natural circadian rhythm. Go to bed earlier. That's the first step to good health. Is getting up early and going to bed early is the first step. Diet is super important. Where we've talked about the doshas before, pitta, kapha and vata, there are different things that aggravate these doshas, okay? So the mild exposure to these can cause these sort of initial levels of accumulation. For example, be aware of how you feel is the most important thing. You'll hear it probably in a yoga class. You'll go to a yoga class and you'll sit down, you sit cross-legged, you close your eyes, like, notice how you feel. And sometimes you're like, what does this even mean? I don't know how I feel. What are you talking about? Is that emotionally, physically? What is it? First up is that within Ayurveda is the mind and body are not separate. They're one. So being aware of how you mentally feel also is how your body physically is dealing with things at that time as well. If you're stressed, you're fiery, your body is hot. It's dealing with things that are hot. If you're feeling like sluggish and slow and lazy, your body's not doing everything that's moving properly. If you're anxious and your brain is moving around, everything's moving too fast, things are going around too quickly. So it's things like that, it's like get in tune with your mind and your body. It is one unit, it's not separate. So going back to after you've eaten a meal, one thing that everyone does in the Western world is overeat. We overeat.
Massively.
We've got something that's awesome. It's like, this tastes great. You just shovel it into your face because say you're sat with someone else, you're having a conversation, you're watching TV whilst you eat, something like that. You're not focused on your food and placing it into your mouth. If you feel really heavy after a meal, that is the first stage of kapha accumulation. So you just need to be aware of it. It's like, I feel really heavy, I've overeaten. For my next meal, I'm going to have something light to make sure that I'm counteracting that accumulation. If you consistently overeat, constantly, that will then lead to a kapha aggravation and then kapha aggravated diseases in the long term. So it's having that focus of being aware. Again, pitta, you've eaten something that's really hot and really spicy. You're sat there and you're like, where's the water and the milk and the bread? I need to cool it down. Don't continue to eat things that are really, really spicy, again. So it's just having that awareness and having that balance. Vata, again, if you've got that constant desire for warmth, you really want to be warm. You get there's some people that they are always cold no matter what they do. That's the first stage of Vata accumulation. So we want to make sure we're addressing that. You're having things that are warmer. So sometimes you don't eat properly, your appetite is kind of all over the place. Just making sure you're having sort of wholesome meals that also are nice and warm. You're having soup and things like that, to help keep that heat within the body. So that's kind of the first stage, is that accumulation stage. Accumulation is just before aggravation. It's really important to know this stage happens all the time, every day, multiple times a day. And it's just take care of that accumulation so you don't go on to the next stage of aggravation. Quite a lot of information. I know I'm a big sharer.
Sharer, hey.
So the next stage is Prakopam, which is aggravation. Okay, so we have natural aggravations within the seasons. Within India, they have 6 different seasons. Early and late winter. So early winter is kind of a bit drier. Late winter is, a little bit more wet. Then you've got spring, summer, and they've got the rainy season as well. And then they've got autumn. They have monsoon season. So these different seasons aggravate different doshas. So spring aggravates Kapha, rainy season aggravates Vata, and autumn aggravates Pitta. So we need to be aware, first of all, that these things naturally happen. It's the weather, it's the climate. We can't do anything about that. But what we can do is control what we put in our faces and, the things that we do with our body and taking care of ourselves. So that's stuff that we need to be aware of. For example, an aggravation of Kapha, which can generally happen within the spring, is things like mucus, heaviness, a lack of appetite, and you're feeling sad and dull. If you start to have those feelings, those emotions, you're generally quite snotty when you wake up in the morning, things like that. That is an aggravation of Kapha that's starting to build. So you need to be aware that that is starting to happen. Vata can be aggravated within the rainy season, and that's dryness. You've got a dry colon, so maybe sometimes you're getting constipated. Teeth feel dry, eyes feel dry, you're quite anxious, you've got a mild bit of insomnia, so you're having difficulty sleeping. Aggravation of the Vata. In the autumn, Pitta can be aggravated, so it's burning. So you've got sour belching. It's one of the first things. They're kind of
that's delightful.
Your eyes are a bit red. You get mild inflammation and stuff within the body and the skin, and you've got a bit more acidity. So you get some hyperacidity and things like that after that you eat. Again, Pitta aggravation. Be aware of these kind of symptoms that are starting to come within the body. Because it's important that at this stage you control it and you do something about it. Because if it don't, then we move on to stage number 3. Stage number 3 is prasam and spreading. First of all, within the previous stage, you've got the seats of the doshas. So these are basically where the doshas are more dominant, where they live. So for example, Kapha kind of lives in your nose and your mouth. Pitta can be in your eyes, things like that. And so you start to feel that aggravation within their seats. Okay, so in the place that they live. If you don't deal with that aggravation, then what happens, you move on to stage 3, where that aggravation then starts to spread throughout the body. Okay, so it's going to start to move to these different places. Aggravated doshas, they'll start spilling out from their seats, and sometimes you won't even necessarily experience clear symptoms. You'll just have these weird different things that will happen, like you'll start to have cravings. So first of all, you need to listen to the good cravings. When your body's like, I really want this really delicious healthy meal, listen to it, eat it. And you ignore the bad cravings. I want chocolate, I want wine, and I want some cheese, and I'm just going to sit here and be upset about it. Don't do it. You need to listen to the good cravings within the body. So the disease itself will crave the bad stuff to help feed the disease. So you want to listen to your intelligence, not make the mistakes of intelligence, and eat the good foods, okay? And once you're going to start to kind of get rid of that clearing, so making sure that doesn't spread. If it does continue to spread, you'll then move on to step 4, which is, I apologise for my pronunciation ahead of time, Stan San Shriyam, which means localization. Stan means place, and San Shriyam means finding refuge. So essentially that accumulation that's been spreading out through the body is then going to go and find a little place where it wants to live in your body, and that can be anywhere. Depending on the flow of the channels, if the channels of the body are nice and open, it can move everywhere, or sometimes it can get stuck, and then that's when what we call ama within toxins within the body start to build up, and it's the beginnings of disease, and you'll start to have what we call pre-symptoms of disease. So Kapha is excessive mucus, Pitta is inflammation, Vata is dryness and soreness. These are mild symptoms and can be very specific to an area. At this stage, if you reach this stage, reversal is not possible. You have to complete the cycle of the disease. It will go through the next stages, and either it will come to, at the end, stage 6, which will go to either healing or complication. Complication potentially ending up on death, depending how bad the disease is. But it's like a cold. You've got to think of it like a cold, right? If you catch your cold coming on early and you deal with it, the cold's still going to come, but it's not going to be as bad. Some people will be like, what are you talking about? Other people are like, yeah, exactly, I know what you mean. Your ears start to itch before you get a cold, right?
Sorry?
So you literally, it's one reaction or the other. Some people are like, yeah, totally, that's when I know I'm getting a cold. Other people are like, you're mental. If your ears start to itch and you get a cold, it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to start taking some vitamin C. I'm going to drink loads of water. I'm going to make sure I do this. You know, you do all those healthy things, and then your cold will still come, but it's copable. What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, copable. You can cope with it. That's the right word, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, brain. The dictionary of Chelsea and P. So yeah, but you can.
That's another jingle to add.
I know, why not? So you can deal with it, but if you don't deal with it, you know, sometimes it gets so worse when you feel like your head is in a bowl of water and you can't see, you know, it's just, everything is awful. So it's thinking about catching the disease early, being aware of those symptoms and dealing with it and doing the right stuff to make sure it's processed through. Stage 5 moves on to the expression of the disease, okay, so which is called biacta. So this is where you get the proper symptoms of disease. This is normally when people go to the doctor. And you can get a diagnosis at this time, and you can take proper treatment and medicine for it at this stage. Finally, moving on to beta, which is differentiation, which is stage 6. Disease has different stages itself as well. So you've got kapha, pitta, and then vata are the stages through disease. For example, if we go back to that common cold example, one of the first stages of the common cold is vata. You start to get that cough, yeah? So your body's trying to get it out of the body. Coughing, get rid of it, sneezing, let's get rid of this as much as we can. If the body can't get rid of it, then it sends your little immune stuff over to it and it's like, kill it, which causes inflammation, right? That's pitta. Pitta is inflammation. So it's heating it all up and it's trying to kill all the bugs and the germs. Then once it's killed, you've got this like gloopy, gross stuff that's left over, which is kapha. And again, vata comes into it. So let's get all this mucus and stuff out of the body because we're getting rid of all of that kind of dead stuff that needs to get out. So we have those stages. We have those stages that it goes through as well. So it's important to make sure we support the body through that healing process. So we're making sure our immune system is supported as possible to make sure we can get that stuff out. And it's important, what they say within Ayurveda is that physicians should all have this knowledge of this is how disease progresses within the body. So we can spot those pre-symptoms, we can spot the accumulation, the aggravation, and we can deal with it at an earlier stage so it doesn't develop into disease.
That's so interesting because when you explain it, it sounds like, especially if you have anything to do with medicine or you're just interested in learning how to treat illnesses and conditions on your own without painkillers or antibiotics, you sort of understand that this is already a thought process that you go through, is that you take multivitamins and you're drinking lots of fluids and stuff like that. Yeah. But it's interesting to see that throughout history, for so long, Ayurvedic medicine has been teaching these understandings, and it's still not that well known that it's an Ayurvedic practice, and these thinkings are related to Ayurveda as well.
To me, it's so logical. It's like, of course that's it. You know, before the first time I was told this, I was like, of course. It's like, if you make sure you're doing this stuff at the beginning by you're honouring your body, you know how you feel, stuff like that, you eat healthy food, you go to bed at a decent time, you know, you do all this stuff you should do, of course you're going to be healthier in the long term. Of course you are. And it's also about keeping your mind healthy as well. It's not just, I go to the gym, I eat salads every day and stuff. That stuff's great, but it's really vata aggravating. If you're a kapha dominant person, awesome, do that stuff. But if you're naturally vata, it's just going to aggravate your vata even further and therefore give you vata-related diseases. It's being aware of your disposition, your constitution, your prakriti, as it's called, and understanding and living the healthiest life that works for you as well. Which is why all these diets that come around like keto and things like that, keto's great for some people, not for everyone.
Yeah.
It's understanding your disposition and making sure, you do what's best for you.
So interesting. I love this sort of stuff.
Oh, me too.
And if you have any questions, listener, and you want to ask us, please email us or contact us on social media, and either of us, more so Chelsea, would be very happy to talk to you about it if you have any questions.
I hear we have an email from a listener about their osteopathy tale, which we have never been more excited about in our whole lives.
I was literally going around my house yesterday being like, oh my God, somebody emailed in, with their osteopathy tale. And my head got about 4 times bigger because I was like, somebody's emailed us about our podcast. It's so exciting. So thank you so much to Katrina who emailed us in.
I haven't heard this yet either.
Yeah, I wanted to save it for you so that you can hear about it, because it's so interesting, and I really, really empathise with Katrina's journey to end up to finding osteopathy and how it's helped her.
I got a message from you as it came in. It's like, don't read it! Don't go in the inbox, Chelsea! So we're going to save it. I love your reaction.
I'm just so excited. So excited. So please, if you have your own osteopathy tale as well, and you'd like to let me be a very happy person, please email us at TTOOspodcast@gmail.com, and we'd love to hear from you, is what lovely Katrina said. She's been enjoying their podcast so far. And she said, as a young teen, I frequently struggled with back pains. And so my mum was constantly taking me to the doctors because she just felt that it wasn't right for somebody so young to have so much pain. And every doctor dismissed us, saying it was either growing pains or due to slouching. And I've always been very tall, so they decided I must hunch a lot. To be honest, I'm not sure that I did. Eventually, my mum was successful in pushing for further scans, and an MRI revealed Scheuermann's disease, which I looked up because I was like, I have no clue what that is. And Scheuermann's disease, I hope I'm saying that right, is a developmental disorder of the spine, also known as Calvé disease or juvenile osteochondroitis. Chondroitis?
Should we break that down? Osteochondroitis, did you say?
Osteochondrosis. Osteochondrosis. Yeah, that's the word.
Osteo being bone, chondro being cartilage.
Yeah. And
so something to do with
maybe
the cartilage on some bones.
Yeah. So it's the osteochondrosis of the spine. So it causes the abnormal growth of usually the thoracic, so the upper back vertebrae, but it can also be present in the lumbar vertebrae. And in Scheuermann's disease, one side of the vertebral body grows at regular rate, whereas the front grows more slowly. So this growth rate leads to a vertebra being with a distinct wedge shape. This growth rate difference in turn leads to an increase in the bend of your upper back, called an increased dorsal kyphosis. And just to give you a quick rundown on what kyphosis is, so you have natural curvature in your spine, and when you hear lordosis, kyphosis, scoliosis, it refers to those normal curvatures of the spine. But lordosis is the normal inward curvature of the spine, located at the cervical, so your neck, and the lumbar and your lower back regions, and kyphosis refers to the normal outward curvature of the spine, so where your thoracic region is. You can have hyperlordosis and hyperkyphosis, which is abnormal pronounced curvature, which is what this is, and scoliosis is the abnormal sideways curvature of the spine. Along with this wedging of the vertebrae in Scheuermann's disease, there is also a change to the bone disc interface. These are called end plate irregularities, and some of the intervertebral spinal discs that protrude into the vertebra. These bone depressions are called Schmall's nodes, and you can see them on x-rays. And these nodes are present for life, do not appear to cause any problems in the future. So this is what Katrina has, or was diagnosed with, and the doctor made some vague explanation of a naturally shattered spine, which when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, you're telling... I think she was a teenager when she got told this. So as a teenager, you're getting told that you have a naturally shattered spine.
A naturally shattered spine. Honestly, I know that it's like, as you know, medical professionals, you have to end up being sort of numb to stuff because you can't have an emotional attachment to things. But telling a teenager they've got a naturally shattered spine is horrendous.
Yeah, like I just thought that was so horrific that he or she said it in that way. And Katrina says they said it in a very blunt manner, told me that there was nothing I could do, I must quit all my sports at once, and I never walk the Malvern Hills again. And even used the word terminal, which is like just, what are you doing? The language practitioners use with patients is so important.
So important.
And using that sort of terminology is just awful. So she said, this was heartbreaking as I love my dance, my rugby. Woo-hoo. Love rugby. And my long treks up the hills, and I was never going to be able to do it again. So a few months or perhaps a year later, she was feeling frustrated and Googled this terrible disease that changed her life. And this is where she discovered that the street dancer and Britain's Got Talent winner, George Sampson, also had the same disease.
Oh. Is that the one who had like the big curly hair? Is that George Sampson?
I don't know, to be honest. I'd never watched the Britain's Got Talent. Yeah. But she was like, how is it that I was sat at home, meanwhile this man was like spinning on his head? So she decided to fight her doctor's advice and search for more through other doctors, eventually being told she could live her life pretty much as normal, but take painkillers every time her back hurt, which is like, with that condition, it sounds like it would be hurting a lot. And she said it was very strong painkillers, where it's like, that's not great to just say, just use painkillers anytime it hurts when it hurts all the time.
Yeah.
So at 24 years old, she'd lived with countless spasms, often strong enough to drop her to the floor. And 2 or 3 phases of paralysis and painkillers which didn't work. And they would numb the pain but wouldn't fix the compression on my spine that she was feeling. And it was like at any moment her lower back would snap. And it's just like, that's such a horrible thing that even the painkillers that they said, oh yeah, that would fix your problem, they weren't fixing the root cause of what was happening to her. Which is what osteopaths really, their thing is trying to find the root cause of people's issues.
Painkillers, that's what they are, aren't they? Painkillers are just
exactly.
mask. I mean, it's great if you know the reason why you've got pain. I know I've just got these pains because my period's coming or something, so I'm going to take some painkillers to ease it. But long-term painkillers are never going to fix the problem at all.
Yeah, it's like putting a blister plaster on a gunshot wound or something like that. Like, it's not really going to touch the sides, is it? And it's not going to last very long. No. So you really need to sort out the root cause. Finally, her mum was seeing an osteopath, and she mentioned Katrina's problems to the osteopath, who invited her to come in. By the end of her first hour session, the osteopath had located the problem, diagnosed the level of severity, which was very bad, and came up with a plan of how he could help her as well. The osteopath had some serious concerns about how her back was and urged her onto the plan, which included osteopathy sessions, physiotherapy and strengthening, and yoga as well. And now she's a year on from her first session, and her pain has gone from daily to exceptionally rare. I thought it was really interesting that her osteo appointments are actually 4 times a year if required. So they're not every week like a lot of people think that with osteopaths and chiropractors that you have to see them 2 times a week or once a week for the rest of your life. They try and give you a management plan for your condition. So she's only seeing the osteopath 4 times a year now.
That's great.
And she does yoga, and posture and strength has drastically improved for her. I'm so happy for you, Katrina, that you are feeling so much better and have a plan so that you can take back your health into your own hands as well.
That sounds amazing. And yay, yoga!
Woo, woo, woo.
If you haven't guessed already, listener, I'm a big yoga fan, considering I do yoga therapy myself. First of all, just talking about sort of the pathology of the disease itself, with where it sits in the spine. The vertebrae form the wrong shape, essentially. It's kind of like a wedge shape almost, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it makes the natural curvature of the spine the wrong kind of curvature. So it's a bit too much or a bit too little, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I can't believe shattered spine.
Shattered spine and terminal. Saying that to a teenager is, which she did say felt very similar to how my story with osteopathy was with my low flow vascular malformation.
Yeah.
They were really blunt about, oh yeah, we probably need to have like a biopsy or MRI to see if it's cancer. And I was like, oh, just throwing that C-bomb around like no man's business to a teenager. It's really important to remember that when you're thinking and talking to patients and to other people in general, like Chelsea and I as students, when we're talking to people who are asking questions about osteopathy and yoga for Chelsea, that we speak in layman's term. So don't use loads of gobbledygook words that they're not going to understand. And to empathise that they're trying to look for answers because they're in pain. So you don't need to bring excess distress to them by using blunt language or excessively dramatic language as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to be personable and a calming, supportive presence, I think, as a practitioner or a clinician. I think it's really important to make someone feel comfortable and feel safe within your presence, that they can trust you. And it's important to deliver that trust as well and not lull them into a false sense of security or something like that. And understand that this is a human that has human emotions and is going through something. And by saying really strong, almost aggressive words, it's going to have a huge effect. Especially when you're just going to send them off and they're literally just going to go onto Google like instantly after whatever you tell them they've got. Whenever someone gets a diagnosis, the first thing they do when they come out is go onto Google to go and find it.
Yeah, which is the worst thing to do, because you could have like a twisted ankle and it turns out that you have a brain tumour as well now once you've looked at Google. It's like, oh,
cancer!
Please. Please don't look at Google as your source of sort of trustworthy information.
Go and find someone that knows this stuff.
Whew, that was a big old beefy episode, Chelsea.
Yeah, I feel like we've gone through a lot of information today, but all very nicely linked, I feel.
Yeah.
I think it had like a nice, all kind of swilling inside and out of each other.
Swilling. Yeah, like systems interlinking, history interlinking, all of that sort of stuff. It's so important to acknowledge the history and how things link together.
If you just, take a little nugget of this and you can look at the history of medicine, and you can also just know how to, give yourself some love and take care of yourself, because, hey, you've only got one body. It's the only place you're ever going to live. So you should probably take care of it. Yeah. Good body. I'll give myself a little pat. I'm sorry, brain, that I say that you're shit sometimes. You're magical. I appreciate you.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much if you've managed to get to the end of this episode, because we really appreciate you listening to us chat about all of the stuff. Please come and follow us on social media at TTOOS Podcast. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of those sorts of things.
Don't forget to like, rate and subscribe. We'd love to hear your feedback and things you want to talk to us about.
And we're just hoping that you're all healthy and happy, or can be that way soon. And we look forward to seeing you and talking to you next week.
Have a lovely rest of your week, and we'll see you again soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.